My name is Hala. As a professional life coach, I help women identify and put into action their values, passions, and talents so they can live the purpose-filled life God's already designed for them. Are you ready to live a purpose-filled life? Let's do this. Hi, my name is Hala Solomon, and I am a professional Christian life coach and educator at HRS Life Coaching. This is the Purpose-Filled Life podcast. And what I do as a coach is I help women to break free from the mold that they've put themselves in or someone else has put them in, and identify who they truly are, who God truly is, and how they can boldly and courageously be the woman that they were originally created to be. I love using the phrase that I help women return to who they are, return to who they were originally created to be. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about stories that we believe about ourselves. And I've been doing a lot of work on this in my own life. I've been helping clients with this work, and I've just been learning the impact that what we believe about ourselves, the narratives that play in our head over and over again, or another way to put it is the stories that we believe to be true about who we are. I've been learning how huge of an impact that plays on our lives. The choices that we make, the jobs that we enter into. A few episodes back, I talked about what drives your life. What's the emotion that drives your life? I think that's episode 4 or 5, something like that. So I can tag it below for you. But I talked about what's the motivator for your life. Today, kind of building on top of that, we're going to talk about what are the stories that you believe that might impact that driving force or impact that motivator for how you live. And so we're going to identify, or I'm going to give you some strategies for how to identify what the stories are that you believe to be true about you. I'm going to use an example from the Bible about someone who did not believe the stories that others tried to write for them about who they are. And I'm going to share some examples from my life of how believing in false stories or false narratives about myself have really impacted me. So first, let me define what I mean by stories. So a story is something that is not true. So a fictional tale, or as I mentioned before, a narrative, something that is repeated. You repeat to yourself over and over again so frequently that to you, it becomes real. So, for example, a story that you believe to be true about you might be that I'm selfish. A story you might believe to be true is I'm rude. A story you might believe to be true about you is that you're lazy. And you say these things to yourself, or they're said to you enough times that they become your identity. So here are some examples. Some stories that I've been able to pinpoint in my life are that I'm lazy and I'm selfish. And these were things that were told to me growing up. I have great relationship with my family, and I really trust and value their opinions, right? And so there were a few times in my life when I was told by a family member that I was being selfish or for some of the choices that I made. I loved participating in different activities. I loved playing soccer and doing gymnastics and ballet and hip hop. And I would just kind of ask my parents to oh, can I do that? Can I do that? Can I do that? And because I was participating in so many things, another family member was like, Hala, that's kind of selfish that you're doing all that. And rather than asking her, what do you mean by that? Or having the maturity at that point in my life to really talk that through with her, I latched onto those words and they became my identity. Like, oh my gosh, I'm selfish. That is part of who I am. That was the story that I latched onto. And the ways that that impacted me were pretty significant. Looking back, kind of in hindsight, as we do, looking back, I can see the ways that me being selfish really hindered me in relationships, dating relationships in particular. thinking that I was selfish for even simple things like saying a movie that I wanted to watch. Oh, well, that's selfish of me. I'm a selfish person for wanting to do something for me. So really little ways, but that kind of muted my voice. So that's an example of how that story impacted me. It really, because I latched onto it, because I felt this is who I am, it prevented me from being confident and from being able to share like, oh, I would really love this, or this is something that I really want, or that's an activity I would love to participate in. I latched onto something a comment that someone else made about me, and I decided that that was my identity. I decided that's who I was. And it's not. It's okay to say something that you want, especially when it comes to dating, relationships, or friendships. Another example from my life is the story that I'm lazy. And that was another comment that family members had made to me. When, I wasn't helping out with housework or chores, and, or really what the moments that I remember when I would ask someone like, oh, can you grab this for me? And, an offhanded comment of like, oh, you're so lazy, just lovingly, probably teasingly in the moment. Maybe there were some moments of frustration, because here's the other thing with stories. I'll kind of side note. There's moments in my life where I've been selfish. There's moments in my life when I've been lazy. And we have those moments, right? When those moments or comments become a story or a narrative is when we attach ourselves to them. Okay, so we'll get into that a little bit more later. But so those lazy, Hala, you're lazy. I chose to repeat that to myself and make it my narrative. And the ways that impacted me moving forward were in college. When there were opportunities for me to participate in something in a class, like a bigger project, I would think, oh, well, I'm the lazy one in the group. I shouldn't volunteer to do that. I probably won't get it done because I'm lazy. When in reality, I'm extremely hardworking. I'm extremely successful at the things that I do. And so because I had latched onto this false story, it stunted my growth. It stunted my learning. And that's really sad, right? And so there's probably moments in your life when someone has made a comment to you. And maybe it's been on a couple different occasions. So maybe it's been a repeated comment where you've had these moments where you've done something or made a choice and someone's pointed it out to you and you've latched onto that story as rather than, oh, that's a bummer that I did that. How can I improve that? You latched onto it as like, oh, this is just who I am. This is a part of me. This is the story that I tell myself. And I'd like to use an example. So that was an example from my life. I'd also like to use an example from the Bible about someone who had so many stories told to them, so many false things said about them, so much judgment on their character. And they did not allow those comments or those situations, those moments in their life to become their identity. They did not latch onto them. And that person is Joseph. So starting in Genesis 39, I believe. 38 might be kind of more background on who Joseph is, but Genesis 39 talks about Joseph. He's the youngest of 10 brothers, and he was the favorite. The dad loved him because he was born to him in the dad's older age. And so Joseph was the favorite brother, favorite son. And because of that, his older brothers despised him, totally hated him. Think about if you have siblings, like knowing, like up front, your dad saying that, oh, well, Joseph's my favorite. So like that would impact anyone. So that's the brothers allowed that to control their choices. But I digress. We're talking about Joseph here. Okay, so brothers hated Joseph. Joseph was very wise. He was very connected to God. God spoke to him through his dreams. And God had big plans for Joseph. The brothers were so envious that they decided, well, first they decided they wanted to kill him. He came out to the field with them to kind of check on them. And as he was approaching, they were like, let's kill him. And I'm kind of making light of it, but they were really going to do that. And one of the brothers was like, no, let's just throw him in a ditch and we'll leave him there. Wolves will get him. And that brother secretly was going to go back and rescue him and bring him home. Then slave traders start driving by, and the brother's like, this will be better. We won't have to kill him. We won't have his blood on our hands. We're going to sell him to be a slave. And so some of the stories that Joseph could have latched onto from this moment in his life is, I'm hated. I don't deserve to be loved. My father loves me, but I don't deserve that. I'm a slave, right? He could have totally, I'm just a slave, His brothers probably said things like, well, you haven't earned anything, like dad just loves you, right? We can imagine all the different things that siblings might say. So he could have a similar thing to me. Oh, well, I'm not hardworking. I must just be lazy because everything's always handed to me. There are so many stories that Joseph could have latched onto, but he didn't. When he became a slave, he was the most hardworking, the most wise. He took care of what he was given, and eventually he was raised to the highest level in the household that he was working for. And this household happened to be someone that was like the high up. Pharaoh's the highest level, and there was someone just below that Joseph was working for. His name was Potiphar. And Potiphar made Joseph in charge of everything eventually. So Joseph did not allow what his brothers believed to be true about him to define him. He did not latch on to their stories about what they thought of who he was. Instead, he knew who he was at his core, and he knew who God was. He had such a strong relationship with God. He always listened to him. He always prayed to him. He maintained his relationship with God through all these things that were happening to him. So that's just, the first part of his story. Now he's working for Potiphar. He's high up in the level at the home. He's in charge of everything. And Potiphar's wife begins to kind of go crazy, fall in love with him, wants to sleep with him. And which makes me wonder, Joseph must have been, I'm just trying to imagine Potiphar's wife. So here's how I visualize everything. A lot of times in the Bible, they talk about an older man marrying a younger woman, or siblings passing out. So and this is not factual, this is just my visualization. It might be factual, but again, it's just, I don't have scripture to back this up. This is just how I'm picturing everything. I'm picturing Potiphar as an older man. His wife is probably younger, maybe more beautiful than he is. And this young Joseph comes in, probably very muscular from working in the field. It talks about how he, is in charge of everything. So he's probably very mature, very wise, very intelligent. A catch, So Potiphar's wife is married to this older man that she's like, oh my gosh, I have to be married to this guy. But here's Joseph. What a handsome, she develops this massive crush on him, and tries to get him to go to bed with her. And he keeps saying no. Your husband has entrusted me with so much except for you. And I'm not going to sabotage that relationship with him and the status that I have for you. That's not, you are in relationship with him, not with me. So he keeps denying her, no. Eventually, they're the only people in the house one day, and she tries to seduce him. And she grabs his cloak, and he slips his way out and runs out. And she uses that. She takes his cloak and she tells her husband, look what Joseph did. Joseph tried to seduce me. Essentially, he tried to rape me. Look, I have his cloak to prove it. So she's bitter. She's angry. And she goes and makes up this total lie about Joseph to her husband to kind of get back at him because she feels rejected. And there's a lot of stories in that Joseph. Okay, so then Joseph goes to jail. I forgot to mention that. So then he goes to jail because Potiphar believes his wife. And there's a lot of stories in that Joseph could believe, right? He could start to manipulate the story and maybe convince himself like, oh my gosh, like I was in the wrong there. I should have just slept with her. Like I shouldn't have been a hard worker. Oh, I'm stupid. I'm so dumb for making that choice. Maybe he would start to believe, oh yeah, was that my fault? That was my fault. I'm at fault for things. So those are some stories that he could have believed from that. And yet he didn't. And so eventually Joseph goes on to work for Pharaoh. His story continues where he has a major impact on the whole Egypt, all of Egypt. He, is in jail and stays true to himself. He doesn't latch on to the stories. He doesn't believe the lies about him. He stays true to who he is. He stays trusting of God. And he continues to have dreams and he interprets the dreams. Others have dreams. He interprets those dreams and eventually is brought to Pharaoh, works for Pharaoh. Okay, so Joseph becomes this very important person who God uses in his story, the true story. And a lot of that is because Joseph chose to stand firm in what he knew to be true. So as we kind of transition now to some action steps for you, there's two different things that I want to leave you with today, or I want you to think about and consider. The first is, what are some of the stories that you believe about yourself? What have you convinced yourself is true about you that's actually just a comment that someone made, or actually just something that someone else did to you, or against you, or just a situation that you decided, oh, this must be who I am. This is my identity now. What are those stories for you? And then the last thing to think about is, what do you need to do to be more like Joseph? What do you need to do to protect yourself from latching onto these stories? What do you need to do to have full and total confidence in who you are and who God is? Just spend some time reflecting on that. If it's a topic that you'd like some assistance with, I would be happy to have a conversation with you. All the ways to contact me are linked below. I hope that you have learned a little bit about how impactful stories can be in our lives, and that it's possible to not identify with those stories. It's possible to protect yourself from them. It's possible to be fully confident and courageous in who you were created to be.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I'd love to hear what you learned from this episode, so feel free to shoot me a message or leave me a comment. And don't forget to subscribe for more tools to live a purpose-filled life.